Hello and welcome to Travel with Austin. I'm Austin, and today we will be talking about the history of the Fairfield County Infirmary. In the early 1800s, township officers called the overseers of the poor were in charge of the poor and homeless. But in 1828, it was determined that an actual facility was required to care for these people, and thus the first stage of the Fairfield County Infirmary was built. Known as the county house at the time, most of the residents were the poor, elderly, and disabled. Now, although poorhouses were often not the best conditions, the first few years the residents experienced decent living conditions. But by the 1830s, the original poorhouse had become crowded, and in 1848, the original infirmary was expanded and replaced so it could serve both adults and children. Now, after the Civil War, the poorhouse was becoming crowded again due to the disabled Civil War veterans and the widows of those who died at war. In 1865, it expanded one more time, adding onto the building and building several outbuildings out back. From 1848 through 1885, the fourth floor of the infirmary, which is also known as the attic or the dungeon, was used as an orphanage. That is, until the county children's home was built, which still stands to this day. By the early 1900s, the poorhouse had bought the land across the street from it and transformed it into a working farm, where the residents of the poorhouse would work. Now, during this time, the official capacity of the poorhouse also reached its peak at 83 permanent residents. Now, other than the sick, poor, and elderly, women were also often dropped off at the infirmary, as women weren't allowed to own land at the time, and if their husband just decided they wanted a divorce or just no longer wanted their wife around, they could just drop them and leave. Another form of resident was the traveler. Some travelers who couldn't afford a bed would stay at the poorhouse in exchange for work the next day. Now, there are reports of travelers who visited poorhouses and found themselves stuck there longer than planned, as by the time the day ended, they were too tired and needed another night of rest, or even being tricked into incurring more debt than their work was worth. Generally speaking, though, once someone became a permanent resident of the poorhouse, they were likely to spend the rest of their life there. One such story and point of this was a young girl who had married at 15. She had been pregnant and lost the baby. Upon losing the baby, her husband ran off, and she was placed into the care of the poorhouse. She lived there for 55 years until she passed away. The residents were also often referred to as inmates, and had rules they had to follow. Some of the original rules of the poorhouse were no leaving without permission, no alcohol unless prescribed as medicine, no profane language or swearing, no fighting. You must be clean. Men and women must stay in their separate wards. No visiting or talking to the opposite sex. The punishment for these rules was being placed into one of the jail cells in the building for 24 hours. If you continued to break the rules, you were taken up to the dungeon, where you would be chained to the wall until they felt you had learned your lesson. Workers often reported hearing screaming from the dungeon area, and at one point a fire broke out in that area that took over an hour to put out. One of the superintendents, who most likely made constant use of the dungeon, was known by the community for his cruelty. Locals had complained of seeing him beating the residents in the fields, and many wanted him removed. In 1924, one of the inmates finally snapped and took a 3-foot iron bar and struck the superintendent. He made a second blow straight to the skull, which caused blood. It is said that this caused the inmate to start attacking more and more viciously, and the inmate would have killed the super. However, the super grabbed a wrench and fought back. This caused the inmate to run off, but employees caught up to him and beat him nearly to death. Life at the poorhouse was not easy, but sometimes events were held to try and make life a little bit better for the people in the poorhouse. County officials would sometimes come for dinners with the residents. Local bands would play for them. Even ice cream socials were held in the poorhouse. And every year at Christmas, residents of Lancaster, Ohio, would donate gifts for the residents. Granted, they did this out of pity, as they saw the residents of the poorhouse as pathetic folk. Now, during its existence, the poorhouse struggled a bit to modernize. In 1917, while about half of America was switching over to electric lighting, the infirmary added gas lighting to the structure for the first time. In 1926, they finally added indoor plumbing. Now, after the Great Depression, there was an uptick in the idea of social safety nets, and especially care for the elderly. In 1935, Social Security was started, and the population of the poorhouse began to dwindle. Now, they were mostly at this point tending to the sick, disabled, and the elderly who couldn't care for themselves. But, unlike many other poorhouses, the infirmary stayed active. And in 1958, the poorhouse was finally upgraded to electric power and lighting. Now, with the shifting demographic of their residents, in the 1960s, the farmland that was owned by the poorhouse was sold to Ohio University and is now the location of Ohio University Lancaster. Now, of course, given the time, the conditions, and the type of people that the poorhouse had, death was a common part of life. A room in the basement is known today for being used as a morgue, but was also used as a meat house. Due to this multi-purpose use and a stream running under the cemetery into the poorhouse, it is said that many of the residents got sick from chemicals and exposure to the dead. Many residents would also give birth at the infirmary. Sadly, though, infant mortality rates were so high that most of those born in the infirmary wouldn't live to see their first birthday. The unclaimed dead who died in and around the infirmary were buried in unmarked graves behind the infirmary. Although there is a sectioned off pauper cemetery, it was later discovered that many others were buried outside of it as well. Even more shocking is that most of the bodies are buried vertically. We really only have rough estimates of how many people are buried. However, the estimates range from 900 to 1,200 souls buried on the grounds. During 1885, there were actually 2 attempts at body snatching at the old poorhouse, both by a Dr. Galuppi. First, he attempted to take the body of a James Hanna, but was stopped by the superintendent. Now, around the same time, a man named Henry Abel had died, and the doctor successfully stole his corpse, stuffing it into a large box. And while waiting on a train, staff noticed the smell coming from the box and got the cops. However, due to a law that had passed just 5 years earlier in 1880 about unclaimed corpses, the mayor at the time said that the doctor committed no crime and let him go free. Now, there were also many notable deaths at the infirmary, such as a man who died after jumping off the roof in a suicide attempt. Although he did not die until after being in the hospital, he did succeed ultimately in his goal. However, no death is as notable as that of Jane Householder. Jane was 73 years old in 1929. She had become ill and was supposed to stay in her room, but instead she went into one of the common rooms of the poorhouse and sat by the fire. It is believed she was cold and put something in the fire to make it burn hotter, but in doing so, she caught her dress on fire. Her screams attracted staff who did attempt to put the fire out, but by the time they did, it is said her clothes were practically burned off and her body was charred. Now, despite this, she did not die right away and suffered in pain for another 9 hours before finally succumbing to her injuries. Jane was ultimately one of the unclaimed and is buried on the grounds of the poorhouse. Now, the poorhouse continued to operate until 1985, when it was shut down and the last 16 remaining residents were moved elsewhere. Over the next year, the building was remodeled. Stairways were enclosed, fire alarms and sprinkler systems were added. Some rooms were changed completely, such as the former doctor's office, which was transformed into a break room. Now, it is also likely that it is during this remodel that the elevator was added to the building. And in 1986, the building reopened as the Miller Building, and the health department ran out of the building. Along with the health department, here are some of the other various services and offices held there: the Emergency Management Agency, Human Resources, Child Services, Big Brothers Big Sisters programs, Teenage Pregnancy programs, the Board of Education. Now, they continued to use the building up until 2011, when it was determined that it would need $4 million in repairs and renovations to continue to be usable for the health department. Unfortunately, they decided that they did not want to pay that much money, and by the end of 2013, all offices located within the building had moved out, and the building sat vacant. At one point, a developer had considered buying the land in order to knock down the buildings and build apartments. However, doing surveys of the land with ground-penetrating radar, they discovered the expanse of bodies buried on the land and outside the cemetery, and they quickly gave up interest. Ohio University said that they had no interest in buying the building, even when offered. Reportedly, there were other bids that were rejected by the county over the years. Finally, though, in 2018, the building was handed over to Habitat for Humanity. As this was a free transfer, they didn't call it a sale, they just called it a movement. Now, the agency said that they plan to restore the building while also using it to help with veteran housing. A really noble cause that sounds great, but it was never realized, and within just 2 years, it seems like they gave up, and they sold the building to its current owners, Adam Kimmel and Ady Gladdis. Now, They bought the infirmary for a whopping $1,001, according to the county auditor. Now, Adam, Ady, and the numerous volunteers that have put in so much time and effort have essentially saved the building. Over the years, as they've hosted tours, photography events, and paranormal investigations, they have worked on restoring the building. Now, the infirmary has been featured on several ghost hunting shows, such as Resident Undead, Destination Fear, and of course, Paranormal Playtime. Today, you can help restore the building by taking a tour, booking a photography session, or even a private paranormal investigation. Most of the funds made from these events go back into the building itself and help restore, renovate, and preserve the building. Now, while the future is always unknown, it looks like with Adam, Ady, and all the volunteers who are helping with the building, that the Fairfield County Infirmary has a bright and long future in front of it. Thank you for watching.